I am going to record this, so I'll make it available as I can through the Planet Bid site. But welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm going to kick the meeting off and get us started. And you should all be muted, muted upon entry. But if not, if you could please mute yourself throughout the presentation, and then we'll take questions at the end. I'm going to kind of run through the presentation pretty quickly. The real purpose of today's meeting is to take your questions for the RFP for the State Street Master Plan and try to answer them as best as we can. So we'll spend about 15 minutes or so, and then I'll really open it up and we'll go from there. So I wanted to kick it off just with brief introductions. I'm Tess Harris. I'm the State Street Master Planner for the City of Santa Barbara. I'm really excited and happy to be in this role. It's a really exciting project. I hope that that's why you all are here today. It's kind of a once in a generation or lifetime opportunity to be working on downtown revitalization for a city that I certainly love and live in and really enjoy, both at work and outside of work. We also have Dave Davis and Ken Saxon here with us today. They're the State Street Advisory Committee Chair and Vice Chair, and both have a wealth of experience in the public sector, in the nonprofit world, and in the private sector. Just really bring quite a great breadth and depth to the State Street Advisory Committee, and I'm certainly grateful to have them leading the charge with that committee. And so we'll be here. I'll take the majority of the questions, but Dave and Ken are here as well to help answer. Eli Isaacson, the Community Development Director, is also on the call. And we have Timmy Bolton, who is a project planner that will be working on the State Street Master Plan with me, who has also joined us. So thanks very much. So just quick starting off, this is the pre-proposal meeting, or it's really an informational meeting. It's not mandatory. I don't have a list of who's attended. It's really just an opportunity for you to hear a little bit more about the project and then to ask questions for us. So I'm going to jump right in and shift gears and briefly talk about Santa Barbara and why I think that you should be interested in this project. So Santa Barbara is really a premier destination on the Central Coast and really California and beyond. It attracts tourists throughout the year. People are coming from across California, from across the country, and really throughout the world. It's a travel destination. And as you can just see in the photos, I mean, there's a lot. If you're not familiar with the area, it's a beautiful, vibrant space. There's a lot of excitement and opportunities here. You've got the mountains, you've got the beach. It's really an active community, lots of green space. And a community that's really well knit together, which makes this even more exciting. So big picture emphasis. These are just some more photos taken from downtown Santa Barbara, an organization in town, really just to show that there's really a wide variety in downtown. So we have architecture, arts and culture, got a lot of various theaters, food and beverage industry is really booming. Shops and art and really tons more, music as well. So while it might be a smaller city, really it's 90 to 100,000 people. It's got a lot going for it in the downtown core. And this picture is really to show you the zoomed in map of the Santa Barbara area with the red arrows that are distinguishing the general project area. So you'll see the red arrows are going along State Street from Sola to the 101 freeway. And then this project will go from Chapala Street to Anacapa Street. I'll show you that zoomed in just a little bit. Then the photo on the right, just showing you kind of from the beach, what we're looking at, really that downtown core. So this is the master plan location. The red is highlighting the area that really we're focusing on, while understanding that this downtown core really affects all of downtown in Santa Barbara. It connects to the Funk Zone, it connects to the waterfront, but we're really looking at this boundary area of Sola to the 101 and Chapala to Anacapa. So a little over 10 blocks in length, and then a couple blocks in width. So I'll now transition into the background and the history of how we got to what State Street looks like today and kind of what the desire is from the community for the State Street Master Plan. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. There's a lot of information in the request for proposals, and there's also a lot of information on the State Street Advisory Committee website. So I really encourage you to look through that more fully. This is just high level. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting, just kind of diving through various aspects of prior documents, was that back in 1964 in the general plan, this already was a conversation happening. And you'll see the quotes that are up on the slide. These are coming straight from the 1964 general plan, meaning that the thought was there to have State Street as somewhat of a pedestrianized area, and recognizing that this is really the central area in Santa Barbara. So a lot happened, and a ton more happened prior to the 1960s, but I'm going to focus on the 1960s a little bit here. So we had the redevelopment agency. Prior to that, the 1969 Parking Assessment District was formed. It created different parking areas along the State Street, what they call the State Street Plaza, partly in response to La Cumbra Plaza, which is a mall area on Upper State Street that was pulling people away from the downtown core. Interesting to see that connection as well today. Just they look very different. And so anyway, the redevelopment agency was formed like a lot of other communities throughout the state. Here, the redevelopment agency had a ton of work really in downtown. So it helped fund Paseo Nuevo, which is a large kind of shopping area in downtown. It increased the sidewalks and landscaping along State Street in the 1980s. Tons of other capital improvement projects, housing, and other redevelopment efforts. And then I just wanted to highlight that what we've seen in terms of vacancies is not just as a result of COVID, that it's happened, well before, for example, the 2008 recession, like in many parts of the country, saw a steep decline as well in and just higher vacancies in the downtown core. And so in the last few years, there's been a number of different efforts that have occurred for State Street. This is just highlighting some of them. I won't go into detail, but you can take a look at them all on your own time. What I will focus on is kind of what's happened in the last couple of years related to COVID. So like other places, the city of Santa Barbara decided to expand outdoor business areas. And for us, this resulted in a closure of State Street about 9 to 10 blocks in the downtown core. So this is really what it looks like today on the right-hand side. And then these are just additional photos of various things that are occurring on State Street today. So we have outdoor business areas that have expanded into the street. We have market type events in the evening. We've got people that are using this space both as a pedestrianized space, but also biking and other transportation modes. So I'm going to now touch a little bit further on the State Street Advisory Committee, because this is really the committee that will be working with the consulting firm along with city staff to come up with a State Street Master Plan. There are 15 members to the committee. Dave and Ken are two of them, and then there are 2 alternates as well. The committee was formed in August and has been meeting monthly. And the links here just have additional information on kind of what we've done so far. You can also find videos from our past meetings, agendas and minutes and all of that if you're interested. This, I just highlighted, it's a resources page on the website. There's a lot of information there that might be useful as you're looking to do a proposal. So I'm now going to shift gears and really talk about the bulk of the presentation, the RFP. So this is kind of our generalized roadmap. Really, we're in that green stage right now. And generally, we're anticipating or hoping to get somebody, firm or firms on board kind of within that April to May timeframe and really kicking off in earnest in late spring, early summer. And then you'll see the master plan timeline. We're really thinking it's probably a 2-year work effort, that might be a little, that can fluctuate slightly. So if if it can go faster, great. If it needs slightly more time, we would work with the firm on that. So I'm going to go walk through kind of what the expectations are in terms of a response. And so really, this is just high level. I really want everybody to be looking in detail on this section of the RFP in terms of what needs to occur in each item. So these are the things we're looking for, but then there are some sub bullets under each for what we would expect. For example, in your cover letter, you should be telling us why you're the best and what kind of experience over the last 3 to 5 years you've had with other similar projects. You'll see we're also asking for a conceptual design example of one block of State Street, so a little bit different there. That can be really high level. It can be a high level design concept. It can be more of a narrative format, but we want to have you show us kind of how you understand what the community needs are and what kind of interesting and innovative ideas you might bring to the table. We're really looking for kind of big thinking, creative partners to work with us because it is a really exciting project. So these are the high-level deliverables of what we would expect in the contract. And then I'm going to kind of go through those deliverables quickly. So just there's project kickoff and research as the first two. And really, some of that is thinking about the branding and visioning of downtown, analyzing the existing constraints and uses. We've also got public engagement and technical studies. I really want to focus on public engagement here. We're really looking for a robust, innovative, trying to reach everybody in the community. And that can be through a variety of formats. I've given examples of what that might look like in the RFP, but that by no means is what needs to happen. We want to see your best, what you think would be the absolute best possible engagement for a community with a lot of different interests and needs, and really wanting to try to reach everybody. So, and then we've got the plan elements and topic areas, and I'm going to go through those in a little bit more detail in the next slide, and then conceptual designs as well. So, this is a plan. We're going to have various iterations of what the design might look like downtown and wanting to work with the firms to really refine that. And that'll be working with the State Street Advisory Committee as well. So these are some of the anticipated elements from that last slide that the plan is going to address. These are elements that City Council has indicated they'd like to see in the plan and that the State Street Advisory Committee has also refined. So you'll see, streetscape design enhancements to streets and sidewalks, circulation, looking at vehicular, pedestrian, cycling, transit parades, other special event type opportunities, economic development, historic resources, really looking at kind of preserving historic resources while looking at different design recommendations for downtown. View corridors, stormwater management, sustainability, equity and accessibility, really kind of thinking about the accessibility and needs of the entire community in the design, homelessness and housing. So looking at kind of what exists today, what kind of programs exist today and the synergies there, public art, implementation. So that would be kind of the action plan or roadmap, how we're going to expect to complete the project. That could be through various pilot projects or by breaking things up into blocks or districts. We'll want to have that conversation. Funding, maintenance, how this area is going to be maintained in the long term, because we're really looking at transforming the space and having at least a 30+ year life on the project. And then operations, the programming of the space and how to activate the space, more than just the design concept. And then going back into the deliverables, we have the implementation plan and then facilitation and hearings. So just recognizing that the State Street Advisory Committee meets monthly, we would want the consultant to be joining us in a lot of those meetings and working through various designs and working through various issues that the master plan is going to address. And there are other bodies as well that we'll want to have the consultant join us in. So this is our anticipated schedule. I talked a little bit about it earlier, but just so you have a general idea of what we're thinking, this is also in the RFP, but really looking at completing the RFP at the end of 2023 or early 2024. Then you've all already found this, I hope, but the RFP is on the Planet Bids website. So make sure to sign up if your firm is not already signed up through Planet Bids through the city of Santa Barbara, so that you can respond. Then the proposals are due by March 3rd. We're hoping to do interviews and selection April, May timeframe, and then really kick off the project fairly immediately after that. And so with that, I'll take questions. Really, we hope you're excited as we are. In my opinion, it's a really innovative project. It's really rethinking the vibrancy and just how the entire community is going to utilize the space, and bringing not only visitors into our downtown core, but also bringing back people that live in Santa Barbara today, and making sure that they're wanting to come back downtown and use it as a real public space. So I'm super excited to be working with whoever it is that we select, and with our city staff and the State Street Advisory Committee. And at this point, I will stop sharing my screen and open it up for questions from any of you. You can feel free to use the chat function if you like, and put questions in there. If you'd prefer, maybe we'll start with that since we have a number of people on the call. Or if you'd like, you can use your raise hand function. If you click on the bottom right-hand side under more, you'll see one of the items should say raise hand. And maybe while we're waiting for, if there are questions, I'll open it up. If Dave or Ken or Eli, if you guys would like to share anything else I didn't cover, or anything else for prospective consultants.
No, Tess, you did a wonderful job, and I would look forward to answering questions here. So I see some hands starting to be raised, so I think you're going to kick it off. So go ahead, Tess.
Great. Okay, so let's start with James.
Hi, Tess. Just a question. I was just down there last week, and of course, COVID has changed everything in terms of how the space is being activated, and taking a lot of traffic off has transformed the space too. Are you open to rethinking the traffic in terms of this master plan, in terms of taking major traffic off the street?
Yeah, good question, James. Yes, we are. So right now, I believe it's a 9-block closure that exists today, and then West Victoria has a one-way street, and then the 1300 block of State Street is also a one-way street. Those are temporary closures, but we would be looking with to really discuss what the location of the closure should be with the selected firm. But we're anticipating there will be at least some element of a closure along State Street. Whether it be what exists today or something smaller, something larger, that remains to be seen. But that'll be one of the probably first items we're really going to want to dive deep into with a consultant.
If I can just add to that, hello everyone, Eli Isaacson, Community Development Director for the City of Santa Barbara. Right now, the 400 block of State Street is not closed. There's a lot of interest by members of the community and several members of the city council in sort of studying closing that 400 block and what it would take to do so. Our public safety team, police and fire, that's a primary access from getting from Upper State Street to the waterfront under the underpass. And so closing it presents a lot of challenges, especially because there's a one-way couplet on Haley and Gutierrez, for those of you who aren't familiar with Santa Barbara. So it's not something that we can just easily do, but it's definitely something that we would like to have studied as part of this master planning process with the help of our own traffic planning team here at the city.
If I could just add, I think, and Tess mentioned it, I think one of the prime questions is going to be how much of State Street should be permanently closed, temporarily closed. It's really a very long retail corridor. Even our preliminary retail studies kind of indicate that it's pretty long and probably not going to be as it is today. You've talked about the 400 block. We have basically what happens on the side blocks and the areas that feed into downtown. So I think that discussion, again, we're visioning for 30 years, the changing retail market. Yeah, I think it's all on the table.
Definitely. Thanks to you both. So I have another question that came into me through the chat. The question was, are there upcoming or desired zoning or land use initiatives in the project area that are attempting to densify or change the mix of uses along the street? So our long range planning staff is working on a number of various housing updates and projects, including a Florida lot area ratio. They're working on a housing element update, average unit size density program. So there's a lot of work that already is being done in the downtown core in terms of housing and development there. So this project won't necessarily take that on as well because it's already being worked on through other work efforts within the city, but we would certainly want to see some synergy, I think, between the two, between the long range planning work efforts and this State Street master plan. And then just kind of building off on the zoning in downtown Santa Barbara, it's the commercial core, and really with the exception, I believe, of industrial, pretty much it's zoned to allow most, whether it's residential or commercial, most development in the downtown area.
And just take a quick opportunity to introduce Timmy Bolton, who will be the project planner on this project, who was recently assigned to the State Street Master Plan from our long range planning team here in community development. And so has a lot of expertise in both the zoning and housing planning that the city's been doing recently. So we're very excited to have him as part of our project team on this.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's see. I see another hand raised from John Rubel. John, would you like to ask a question?
Thanks. Would you like to characterize what the current thinking is about how adjacent blocks to this specific State Street set of blocks factor into the thinking? For example, the connection through to the beach or other aspects of the kind of, the neighboring conditions, if you will.
Sure, yeah. So there's, what I would envision this plan doing is really recognizing what already exists on the waterfront and the funk zone areas. So those aren't really included in this plan per se, but they should touch upon the connection there. So the waterfront, you'll see from Stearns Wharf up to the kind of State Street underpass area where the 101 crosses over. The sidewalks are a bit wider. You have redevelopment that's recently occurred, from the hotel industry, kind of right along there, restaurants, and that, just kind of pulling there's a lot of energy in that area, and then also in the funk zone. And the idea is that we would have that same vibrancy in State Street downtown. So being able to kind of look upon those successes and also doing something unique and interesting along State Street and that general area. When I'm talking about State Street, I do want to make sure that we're all thinking of the full area from Chapala to Anacapa, because there may be opportunities to encourage people to go down those side streets or go through the paseos that we have in our downtown area. And those are also really important elements, that it's not just the one street, but thinking about the synergy and connectiveness to the others.
Tess, if
I
I could add just there, historically, the city has always tried to tie the waterfront to downtown. We've tried to draw from the synergy that's happened down there in the funk zone and in the hotel area along Cabrillo to bring those people and funnel them up State Street to continue in the vibrancy, connecting both downtown and waterfront. Historically, we've had a shuttle system, electric shuttle system, which tied that area together, a downtown waterfront shuttle that brought people into the pedestrian area downtown, which we'll continue to basically look at. So the question's right on target in terms of the functionality connection between the waterfront. There's always then also the freeway connections of basically how they feed into the downtown area in terms of the circulation, which the previous speaker had talked to. And then there's this whole question of housing and whether downtown's going to be infused with a lot more housing, which also then changes the dynamic with the outlying areas. Good question.
And then there's also a project slated for later this year, which is a pedestrian enhancements to the underpass connecting lower state to upper state. And so that is happening. I think that's planned to start, as I said, later this spring or early summer. And it consists of widening the sidewalks on both sides of the underpass, adding some nice aesthetic improvements and better lighting as well to really enhance that connection of the waterfront to the area of State Street that's currently closed.
Great. So I've got a number of questions that have come in through the chat. So I'm going to take a couple of those and then go back to those that have their hand raised. So another question I got was, I understood from a colleague that there is another State Street plan in progress. If that is the case, can you please help us understand what that effort is and how this project relates to it? My assumption, I'm not entirely certain on what you're referencing, but my assumption is that you're talking about kind of the interim operations on State Street. And so right now we do have a closure in place, and outdoor business areas are able to expand into the street area while keeping a fire lane intact. So there are businesses that have expanded into the street. We still have functioning sidewalks. So there's a bit of a break between, for example, a restaurant, then there's a sidewalk, and then they may have an outdoor dining area. And so that is likely to exist through December of 2023 or so, basically until we really have a master plan kind of thought through and in place. And then we'll want to be transitioning into the more permanent, what downtown is going to permanently look like. But what I do want to just kind of stress that what exists out there today is temporary. And that was kind of an effort to be able to help businesses throughout COVID expand. And then also recognizing that this plan is going to occur and that we need more time than just a couple months to be able to really think through all of the different facets of the project. So I'm assuming that that's what the conversation is that this person's referencing. I would also just highlight right now, the interim piece is kind of more the operational component, looking at how the street is functioning from, kind of the maintenance and general operations and cleaning and getting businesses, helping businesses as much as possible. And we're kind of trying to have a bigger thinking approach here for the long-term master plan. So I just don't want that. I don't want what exists today to be limiting to consultants when they're thinking about a design. Let's see. The next question I have is, have you received any early feedback from the stores and restaurants in the study area? Has the study generated any interest in businesses looking to move to the area? So in general, I think people are pretty supportive of the closure in the study area. We've heard, more businesses on State Street because right now we have this intermediate closure on State Street. So those businesses are benefiting more so than businesses on some of the side areas. But in general, members of the public are overwhelmingly supportive of the closure, and businesses are generally really supportive. There have been some comments from some of the retail industry that are not as thrilled with the closure. Part of that is due to not having people being able to drive up the street and see a sign for where they're wanting to go. And so, signage may be a component in the design as well. Let me look. The next question. What about the traffic and parking impacts on adjacent blocks? Will that be part of the study? So yeah, good question. Yes, we're going to need to look at kind of the overall circulation and transportation component. If you look in the plan elements or topic areas section of the RFP, that section is pretty robust in terms of what we might consider or want to have a consultant really think through. And so looking at potential parking impacts, but also just kind of overall circulation. The way that State Street in most of the blocks, kind of with the exception of the 400 block, but many of the blocks have existing public parking infrastructure immediately behind State Street. So kind of in between the Chapala and Anacapa area. And that is often, or that's really infrastructure that's already in place that allows people to park and be able to quickly access State Street. But we'll want to kind of look through that a little bit more closely.
I think this issue also ties into the question of long-term funding strategies for State Street. Right now, operations and maintenance are managed by our downtown parking team. They are funded by revenues generated by parking in the downtown. And so as we lose on-street parking in the study area, we also have to look at ways to recoup some of that lost revenue if we're going to continue to sustain maintenance and operations in the area. So that's an important connection with sort of the connection of the plan to ongoing sort of revenues for not just implementation, but also operations.
Definitely. All right, let's go to KTUA, who has their hand raised.
Yes,
Matt?
hi Tess, this is Matt. Question was somewhat around the term of placemaking and how that's defined in the RFP there. What do you envision being kind of the thought of placemaking within the context of the historic district? And are there specific goals or desires that you and the team there have thought about regarding placemaking as it relates to that historic district?
So yeah, it's a good question. And I'm just going to kind of answer it generally, I think, for the moment. But I mean, that placemaking would be a key component to the project. We want this to be something bigger than just a dining and shopping area. It really should be an area for the entire community. And so, placemaking would be something we definitely want to have seen in the plan. Did that kind of help, Matt, or did you have another piece to that question that I missed?
Yeah, no, that helps to clarify it. I think I guess we're wondering in terms of the overall strategy or thought of placemaking, if that's something that's a little bit more defined within the historic district, or if the proposal and proposers really should think about bigger picture ideas that may go outside of what the historic district entails and some of the current codified elements within the HLC.
Matt, I think the answer to that question is yes. It's both and, it's not one or the other. And I know that's where some of the tension is in this master plan, right? Is the ability to sort of do both simultaneously. And that's where we're looking for a lot of creative thinking from you folks in terms of what you're proposing as a strategy to sort of both honor the very important historic legacy of State Street, but also start planning for the State Street of the future and coming up with ideas that sort of bridge the past and the future. Dave, we are very fortunate to have Dave Davis with us today because he is an expert on this as a former community development director and current SSAC chair. So I'd love for him to chime in on this as well.
Well, I was just going to echo exactly what you just stated, and that is big picture is very important to this process. We're at a pivot point in terms of where downtown is going. In fact, the placemaking essentially is we'd like to direct downtown basically in a positive way, but we're directing it into an economic and social future, which we're pretty uncertain about. So the visioning aspect of this process is as big as the design aspect in terms of bringing the community together to talk about the future. So Eli, you hit it right on the head. Looking forward to working with whoever is here on that type of concept.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I have a question that came in from the chat that's maybe a little bit or slightly related. The question is, does the study include design and planning concepts for the land uses and buildings? In other words, the vertical elements, or is it primarily the horizontal streetscape? So that's, I think you'll hear from different people, different responses, and different people have different thoughts on what it could be. But I would envision that, really we want to focus on the public space and public area and the streetscape, while recognizing that there could be opportunities in the future for other things to shift in the downtown core. But the public space is going to be the primary focus here. There's a lot of historical, there's a lot of historic structures within the downtown area. Many of those are not owned by the city. So really thinking through the reality of being able to change some of those versus what we know that we can change in the public space. Dave, did you want to add anything to that?
You touched on the fact that the public space is the key element. How that interfaces then with the private spaces is exactly the tension and nature of this particular project itself. Downtown, because of the height limit, because of the zoning aspects, I don't see great changes in terms of the bulk and scale of what's going to happen on State Street. That's pretty well confined in that regard. I think the biggest driver there is going to be this whole question of FARs and housing development in the State Street corridor. But the public spaces, both on the street, as well as there are some major public areas, the courthouse across just outside of the area, the De La Guerra Plaza area, the Library Plaza, and other public spaces like the underpass, and all of how that basically then interfaces with the future of the vision that we have of where State Street should go, all very important. So yeah, we're looking to basically tie those together through the public spaces with the future for development in the future.
Awesome, thank you, Dave. So let's go, it looks like Mukul, you have your hand up.
Yes. I think you initially in your initial comments mentioned that the design of the one block that you are asking the applicants to submit, you mentioned that it needs to build on the community needs. Do you all have a sense of what are the additional community needs that have been identified so far, besides what exists on the ground as part of the temporary closure? Have the community asked, hey, this is great, but could we also have X, Y, and Z? And that would be great to look in the future permanent or temporary closure.
Yeah, so I'll take that a couple different kind of with a couple different responses. So one, I think we're really expecting that the city is going to be partnering with the firm or firms that are selected to do a lot of the outreach from the public perspective on what they like or what should change. While there's been a little bit of outreach, really that needs to expand quite a bit. And so I don't think we have a great answer there. What I suppose what I meant more in the kind of example of a design concept is the goal of that is to understand kind of how your firm or your team is really thinking when you're looking at this project, not just responding with, your resume and kind of standard boilerplate information, but what you are thinking of when you're thinking of State Street specifically or the Santa Barbara specifically, and why this, is going to maybe be a little bit different than another project you've worked on. So trying to just kind of suss out the thought that you've maybe put into your response a little bit. And that could come more from kind of the plan elements that we have listed out there. So I think I had mentioned, pulling in maybe one or a couple of those elements. So what I mean by that is you're looking at kind of streetscape design, or you're looking at what transportation could entail, or you're looking at historic resources or public art and the thought is, it's not that there's a concept that we want to see, and that's going to be the concept we want to take forward. The idea is more to understand how you approach a project from a design standpoint and that placemaking standpoint as well.
If I could also basically say, I think in terms of the community needs, we want to basically engage the public as to what they think that the future needs may be. And in fact, not just engage them, but to stimulate their thoughts on what's possible. And again, so the public participation aspect of this plan is really key to engage the public in, like I say, basically getting them in touch with what the future needs might be for the area, and then engaging them in terms of how that plays out in terms of the master plan itself. Public engagement is really critical to that.
And Tess mentioned this in her previous response, but I don't believe there's an expectation that whatever is presented in your proposal is somehow locking you into a design moving forward. This is more of a initial thinking, expressing your understanding of State Street, not just sort of, showing us what you've done in other locations, but really thinking about what would be your sort of bespoke response to the needs, challenges, and opportunities here in Santa Barbara. So that's, I think, what we were thinking when we included that in the RFP request.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to the chat for a couple more, and then I'll come back. Probably we'll go with Sam after the chat question, couple of the chat questions, and then James. So the next question I have is, can I ask what you have in mind regarding the discipline of consultant that you would expect to lead the study? For example, should the team be led by an urban designer, an architect, or an economic development specialist? And then the second part of the question is, are you able to provide an indication of the city's budget for this project? So the first part of kind of discipline of consultant, ideally, I think, we're hoping for a group or a firm that's got a number of different elements to them. So, the urban design component, you may have, somebody that's doing more of the technical studies. You might have somebody that's looking at the existing kind of on the ground situation and economic development, but I kind of put that back to you on who you think the best kind of lead for this type of project would be. We have some thoughts in mind, but really we're looking at what the entire team will consist of. And then just the question about the city's budget for this project. So this project is funded through Measure C funds. And so it's not a grant funded project, meaning that there's not a specific cap that we're hitting at, right now. But I would expect that the city, really would want to stay within a general limit between 200 and 400,000, and probably not really exceeding that too much. And, just on that, really what we're looking for in this proposal is kind of your best foot forward, what you can really bring to the table that's going to set you apart from other firms, or, what's going to make downtown the best. And then staff will work with the selected consultant to figure out where we might want to emphasize something, or where something might need to be pared down a little bit, or where city staff may take more of a lead to try to work within that general budget. Okay, the next question I have is, how have the businesses responded to the temporary closure of State Street? So that we kind of touched upon this earlier. Overall, really supportive. General public, really supportive. Overall, businesses are really supportive, with the exception of some of the retail businesses, but really overall, it's, even in retail, there's a lot of people that are really excited about the closure. And I think that's only going to continue. Oh, yes,
on that
go for it.
point, I think there's an important distinction to be made, and that's business owners versus property owners. And that's going to be a really interesting conversation. We have a lot of sort of absentee landlords on State Street, properties that are in family trust, sort of not very active property owners who are going to be less interested in improvements to State Street if it means an assessment or some sort of property business improvement district for them. And so navigating that sort of space between what our business owners want and what our property owners are willing to support is going to be an interesting part of this project in my mind. Dave, you have a lot more experience with that, but I know you and I have had some conversations along those lines.
Yeah, well, I think you captured the gist of it. I guess I would say that I have been impressed with the strong support that we received from the community, the city council, the businesses on State Street, in the majority, if not the vast majority of the property owners. The question really is, to a degree, going forward, since it's all been temporary, how much of State Street is going to be closed? Who's going to basically get the benefit versus the impact? That's all basically going to be part of this process. So I think there's a lot of TBD as we go forward. You know, right now, essentially, we've got almost 12 blocks which are closed, which is a big area. And if you know, when you walk that area, some areas are thriving, some areas not so much. There are some natural nodes, an arts district, an entertainment district, government district. There's a lot of TBD. So again, I don't know if there is a permanent answer to that question right now, other than to say that overall, really strong support for enhancing the pedestrian area and keeping a pedestrian mall or closed area on State Street. Ken, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree with everything that you said, Dave. That it's you know, part of the irony of this moment is that, you know, as Tess said, you know, the rethinking of downtown Santa Barbara has needed to be done for quite a while, and what COVID did in essence is it created a much greater sense of what the possibilities are. There's more degrees of freedom to really rethink things now. You know, for 30 years that I was here, you know, people would talk about closing State Street and nothing happened. And in 1 week, all of a sudden it happened and people got to experience it. And I agree with your point that it's been, given how controversial that discussion was, it's been surprising in the near unanimity of excitement for how the energy on the street has changed and what that's done to bring people back downtown. So this is a very exciting time to be doing this project and having these discussions.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, it certainly is. Okay, I've got a lot more questions that have come in, so I'll keep going through. So one of the next ones, what are the expectations? Let's see. What are the expectations regarding historic resources for the master plan? And then another question, is there an openness to bringing artists or community-based organizations directly onto the consultant team through the proposal? So expectations regarding historic resources, I think recognizing that our downtown core is made up of a lot of historic resources and having kind of a keen understanding of that. We do have a member from our Historic Landmarks Commission that's on the State Street Advisory Committee. And so, you know, the hope is that, you know, him along with members from the Planning Commission and City Council, that they can really champion the project when it goes before a hearing body. But that, you know, really just taking that into consideration that it's a historic area, it's a historic district, and there's a lot of key components there. And that's exciting too. I mean, we should be thinking about what is the unique kind of landscape and architecture, and part of that comes from that view corridor piece of making sure people can experience all that the downtown has to offer, including the architecture.
And let me just go off on that also. In a lot of places, historic preservation is over here and historic resources are over there, and planning and design reviews over there. Here, basically, HLC is essentially the design review body for the entire downtown, and reviewing the El Pueblo Viejo ordinance and their design guidelines. Very, very important, basically, to understand the context of what downtown is in that regard. And that is geared towards moving Santa Barbara forward into the future, but within the context of that historic framework that we have set up relative to the character of downtown. And I know while everybody's really supportive of this and that, everyone also loves the character of Santa Barbara. It's a signature character, which we need to maintain.
If I could speak just for a moment to the part of the question about community-based organizations. So Santa Barbara has an extraordinarily rich and historic array of community-based and nonprofit organizations. And there are many of us on the State Street Committee who are deeply connected with them. One of our members is the CEO of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. So I would think that in all the public engagement parts of this process, part of what we'll be engaging with is the many different resources and assets that this community has out of community-based organizations, including many, quite a rich arts and culture community.
Definitely. I think that'll be a piece that will be really important to make sure that is included. All right. The next question, can you please describe existing transit service to downtown Santa Barbara? So yes, so there's been a variety of different pieces in downtown. We have MTD, the Metropolitan Transit District, that Dave is on the board for, so I can let Dave talk about that in a little bit. There was a shuttle service that occurred downtown, connecting the waterfront to downtown and then going along Cabrillo Boulevard where the waterfront exists. That shuttle service stopped at the beginning of COVID for budgetary reasons, but that's something that members of the public have indicated an interest in. So, you know, that'll be something that we'll want to study, at least to understand whether to bring something like that back. And then also just connections between the bus system and the downtown area and beyond, making sure we can connect. And then, you know, we have Amtrak, there's a train station in downtown as well, connecting people through rail that way. And then otherwise, you know, a really active bicycle community. And then the pedestrian component. Dave, did you want to add anything?
I would just say,
specific to that?
I would just add that the MTD is a special district. It's not part of the city. It is a special district. I'm chair of the MTD, and part of my role of being on the SSAC is essentially bringing some of that traffic transit information, as well as Hillary Blackerby, who is also a planner for the MTD. We actually run a hub and spoke type situation. It's not a grid. We have a central transit district facility, the right downtown at Carrillo and Chapala. So all of our lines come into downtown within the study area here, and then go back out to the south of Carpinteria and north all the way out to Elwood. And we have run the State Street shuttle for the city of Santa Barbara. Interestingly enough, the shuttle was a mitigation measure originally for the Paseo Nuevo project in order to have people get out of their cars and walk on State Street. As test indicates, that particular service has been terminated by the city. They're no longer asking for that. But in the State Street master plan, we're going to be looking at what types of transit service, including a new type of shuttle, might be appropriate for the area, be it a circulator or something else. So we'll be looking closely to working with the city in terms of doing that. I would also, and Tess touched on it, a growing bicycle community here, which has integrated itself into downtown, and how the bicycle master plan works into the circulation and components of mobility for downtown is going to be very, very important.
Thanks, Dave. All right, let's go to Sam Frommer, who has their hand raised.
Hi, good morning. There are a lot of different disciplines as part of this, you know, looking at streetscape, mobility, all the things that we've been discussing. How will this be managed on the city side? Will there be like an advisory committee, or will it be a single project manager? How will that work?
Sure. So yeah, it's both. So I will be working on it as kind of the manager from the city side of things, along with Timmy Bolton and other city staff, Eli Isaacson as well. And then there are some others too. Really, it's a cross-departmental effort. And so we'll be bringing other people on depending on specialty and topic. At the same time, we do have the State Street Advisory Committee that was formed. That's the 17-member committee that Dave and Ken are the chair and vice chair for. And their goal is to work on the State Street Master Plan with the city staff and with the consultant, and really bring, try to get something that's really going to be exciting for the entire community moving forward. And you'll see there's just a range of backgrounds and interests on the advisory committee. And part of that is to try to represent as much of the community as we can within that advisory group.
Yeah, if I could add, Tess has touched on it. The stakeholder group is made up of individuals who have a multiplicity of interest within the downtown business, community, transportation, you name it. And we have a representation in that regard, as well as 3 councils. 3 out of the 7 council members also sit on our subcommittee. So we have both the policymakers, a vast degree of stakeholder involvement in that regard. And as Tess indicated, a multiple of departments being involved, with Tess being our lead there.
Great. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions we've gotten. I'm still getting a number of questions about budget. It looks like some people might not have heard the response. So just as to say it once more, the city is really looking at targeting kind of a general, it's coming from Measure C funds in terms of budgeting. I think that we're kind of expecting 200,000 maybe to the 400,000 range, but that's sort of the range. I'm not sure we would go much past that. We also want to work with the consultants to try to figure out where that can, how that can work best. And so we want you to put your best foot forward and tell us what you can do, and then we can work on trying to pare that down a bit if it needs to be.
And Tess, you might just clarify for people, you mentioned twice Measure C funds. What that is that was a special sales tax that the council basically added for capital improvements, focused primarily on capital improvements, but can also be used for planning studies such as this. So it is a general fund revenue coming in through a special sales tax.
Thanks, Dave. That's good clarification. Okay, so I got another question. I noticed Lower State, when I was visiting Santa Barbara last year, I noticed Lower State Street had a more party vibe while the upper part was quieter and more retail focused. Is the goal a unified physical vision and a unified activity vision, or do you see the 10 blocks having different experiences? That's a great question. And I think we're going to be working through that with the consultant firm and the State Street Advisory Committee, but just naturally, yes, there's an area that's kind of more arts or theater, also, more restaurants. There's an area that has kind of restaurants and bars. There's a more retail area if you look at it really in general, but there's pieces throughout. So you may, you're going to have, right now, you'll see a retail area with mostly retail, but there are a couple, restaurants on the street. So trying to figure out what makes the most sense in terms of a closure in the long term. 10 blocks is a pretty long length. It's about a mile long. So just recognizing that and trying to work through that. That's going to be a key component. Okay, I got another question on, for purposes of putting the proposal together, do you know what background information will be available for a civil survey and utility survey? Does the city have a preliminary budget? So I think we answered the budget question. In terms of the civil survey and utility survey, I would need to check in with our public works staff just on what information they have, but the consultant or the firm or firms would be working really closely with that staff to get all of the information that the city has on what utilities exist in the area and the general survey information that we have for downtown. So we do have some of that. Another question that came in is it possible to speak to the relevance of the 2020 design charrette as it pertains to this RFP? Sure. So that's going to be one of the kind of components that will play into the project that we encourage the State Street Advisory Committee members to look at, so that we all have an understanding of what occurred in Santa Barbara through AIA that did a really great job on the 2020 design charrette. It's on the State Street Advisory Committee resources page under the website. So if you're interested, feel free to take a look. And there are some pieces there that might work and some that might not work for kind of just the reality check of downtown and what this master plan can entail. So I think we may, look at it for kind of thoughts and and guidance in some ways, but at the same time, this is a separate project and focusing from the city standpoint on what can be achieved and what we're seeing as the downtown future. But it certainly plays a role. Okay, the next question, is there a city preference for a local leader and out-of-town urban design expert as the lead firm for responding as prime to this proposal? I'm not sure that we have a preference. I do think, it's important to have, you'll see in the scoring portion of the RFP, there is a reference to local expertise. So having, somebody that brings that local knowledge, I think is going to be helpful in a response, but whether that is a prime or a sub-consultant on your team, I'm going to leave that up to you for what makes the most sense. Let's see, the next question, is the city open to public-private partnerships to fund master plan efforts and also ongoing maintenance and programming of a completed project phase? Yes, that is something that the city is open to, having a public-private partnership. And there are other ways to fund a project like this. I think we would be needing to look at a multiple opportunities for funding, but that would be one. Another one, is it correct to assume that environmental impact assessment and lead mall law process would be led by the city in the case these are needed? So I'm not sure what you mean by the second part, but yes, so the CEQA aspect of it, the city will be working on at this point. Another question, can you talk briefly about any identified stormwater management resiliency goals for the State Street project? Yes, so the city follows the NPDES permit requirements for stormwater, and it's worth taking a look at the website through the city that really focuses on stormwater management. But regardless of if you're a private project or a city project, you still need to follow the stormwater requirements. So this project would need to fall into that category. So we would need to be looking at how to offset any stormwater needs related to the project. And then, from kind of the sustainability aspect of the project, I think obviously that would be a great benefit to pull stormwater into a design.
I also think that stormwater is an area where there's an opportunity for some innovative thinking. I also think it's an area where the size of the study area starts to present some opportunities at more district scale response to stormwater challenges. Right now, we really look at things on a lot by lot, parcel by parcel basis. But through this master plan effort, we may be able to come up with some strategies that deal with things, as I said, more on a district scale or through a district approach. And so that's definitely an area where we'd like to focus some of our efforts in the master planning process.
And in terms of sustainability, also, you've talked about stormwater, but also in terms of other aspects of sustainability. I think the city really, and I think that the State Street Advisory Committee really would like to see this to be an exemplary project when it comes to sustainability in all staff, from that to actually even look at the question of electricity. We have a recently adopted community choice energy program. The city of Santa Barbara is its own energy provider in that regard. And the opportunities there basically to tie together sustainable projects, be they solar or other downtown, is something which we'd really like to look at. So sustainability and an exceptional opportunity here to move forward with something for the next century is something we're looking for.
Absolutely. Okay, it says, the next question, the master plan budget suggests that you are not looking for a CEQA level of analysis. Can you please give some guidance? Okay, so I think we answered that question. So staff will be doing CEQA, but there are some technical studies that have been identified in the request for proposals that we would expect a consultant to assist on. that may be an area where we'll need to have further conversations on what that might entail. So hopefully that helps a little bit there. James, it looks like you have your hand raised again. Did you have another question?
Can you just talk a little bit about the nightlife and how it's been affected too recently, how it's changed, and just your vision about the kind of nightlife for the street?
Sure. So I think that'll be something that we'll want to discuss further with the advisory committee and members of the public, but it certainly has changed. And right now, the 500 block of State Street would be an example of an area that's really, in my opinion, transformed to a degree. You just see a lot more activity in the street in terms of restaurants and kind of the nightlife and bar scene. And so that street itself currently often has the most people on it, especially in the late afternoon and evening timeframe. There's also just a number of the makeup of that street is a little bit different, and really it's almost almost solely restaurants and bars with some exceptions, but those are really the main businesses on that street, which makes it a little bit different than other areas of State Street that have more retail focus or more office space.
I just put out there the word temporal, right? The aspect of the temporal use of the street going forward in the future. You've got night, day, you've got weekend, you've got summer, winter, you've got parades, community activities versus business, right? The temporal nature of the space itself is something which I think we really want to focus on going forward.
Absolutely. And making sure that in a space that might have some nightlife, that there, if that area is going to be closed permanently, what is happening in the day where people aren't there as often, or in the morning hours when there isn't businesses open, that's going to be really key.
And I can tell you from working 25 years doing retail revitalization before, how you service an area like this also, the service needs of an area end up starting to dictate a lot.
Definitely. I think I've gone through the questions that I've received so far. If I missed a question of yours, feel free to put it back in the chat or raise your hand. Looks like I have another question that came up. What is driving the 2-year project timeline, and would it be possible to condense the timeline? Sure, it would be possible to condense the timeline. We're open to that. I think 2 years is we're hoping to really be towards the end by that 2-year mark, but if it can be sooner, that's great. Just also recognizing there are a number of different groups within the city and in the public in general that we're going to want to ensure outreach is done for. So also, working with the State Street Advisory Committee that currently meets monthly, making sure that they're really working closely with the consultant. It's, and then going through the hearing process, but then also I do think the public outreach component is going to be a key component that's going to take a little bit of time to do it effectively. So yes, it can be done shorter than 2 years. And I just would be interested to see how you think you could do that.
Yes, I have a question. I'm sorry. I have a question which I want to put out for people or for staff also. And I've just thought of it coming into this session here. And that is the public participation, pandemic oriented and post-pandemic oriented. Again, how we basically would differentiate how we engage the public this summer and next fall, if in fact we're in another spike versus a sense that we're out of this, and in fact we're being able to engage them face to face. I just want to put that out there for people to think about.
I think it's a great point, Dave. And one of the things I think we're really interested in seeing is I think all of you on this call have been sort of challenged with public engagement on your projects over the past 2 years. And so we're really interested to see what has been successful for you on your projects around public engagement. I think it's not a reach to say folks are pretty tired of Zoom meetings. So any, creative ways to reach folks, whether we're still in sort of a virtual environment or if we are able to, gather in maybe smaller groups, how we would do public engagement with some of those constraints. I want to go back to the previous question about project timeline. I think one other sort of thing to consider in terms of the project timeline is just earlier this week, City Council adopted a economic recovery ordinance that allows the temporary use of State Street for these outdoor business facilities. That is in place until the end of 2023. And so one of our goals is to make sure the master planning process aligns with that temporary extension so that we can then transition into another transitionary phase focused around implementation of the master plan. So we aren't necessarily constrained by the ERETO, but I do want to convey a sense of relation between that economic transition ordinance and this master planning effort and the timelines of each and how they interplay between the two. So.
Great, thank you, Eli. James, I see your hand up again. Did you have another question?
No, I'm good. You're being
okay.
terrific.
Mukul, you have your hand raised?
Yes, please. Just building on what Dave said and keeping in mind, I think none of us want to find out what the next Greek alphabet is. Keeping in mind also what you said, Tess, the budget is about 200 to maximum, say 400, about 400,000. Would you like a budget that would provide that flexibility that, in the future, it'll become in person? Because, engagement can vary dramatically different. Our approaches can be dramatically different, but would you like to have that flexibility in the budget?
I would like to. I mean, being able to see the differences and what, if we can go, more to in-person and just kind of the fluctuation of what that might entail, I think that would be helpful to see.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question came in about whether the city would lead the pedestrian mall law process if needed. I am not certain on that question. Dave, I see you're shaking your head.
I have no clue what that is.
Okay. I'd have to work through, I think we'd have to check in with our city attorney and see exactly what that would entail, but hopefully that we would work. If that is something we need to do, we'd work with the consultant and then our team on the city side.
I do know that, again, one of the issues that we've had is the emergency ordinance, the economic recovery ordinance. These are temporary closures of streets. If we got to a point that we did a master plan that had permanent closure of streets, then you're having to go through all sorts of things to basically general plan amendment, California traffic or highway code that basically permanently close the street. You have to go through a public process to do that and make certain findings to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that the permanent closure of area is something which we'd be talking about, possibly then having to go through a public process to make that legal.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. And yeah, I mean, the city would be working on that, just like if there's a general plan element that needs to be updated in response to the closure of the street, that's something that city staff would work on as well. Are there any other questions at the moment? Okay, great. Well, I know we've talked quite a bit and there have been a number of questions, so I hope this was helpful and just better understanding what we're looking for and starting to think about and put together potentially a response. And we really look forward to working with whatever team it might be that's selected. I can't emphasize it enough. It's from my perspective as a planner, it's a project that is really unique and just thrilling to be working on. And I look forward to working with whatever team it might be and becoming partners and collaborators and really kind of extending the feel of an overall team.
I want to thank everybody for their interest and being here, their participation today, and look forward to your proposals. We're really excited, which we hope you are too. So I know, speaking for Ken, Tess, and Eli, we really look forward to basically working with you in one form going forward. So again, thank you for your involvement today.
Yeah, I also just want to say thanks. This is an exciting once in a generation project. And, I hope you'll decide to submit a proposal. I know that's no small undertaking or small decision for you guys. I know that there's a lot of cost associated, a lot of time that goes into putting together a response, but I think it's a really fantastic opportunity, and I hope everyone will submit a proposal to the city. We look forward to reviewing whatever it is you share with us. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you
Have a
all
great
so
weekend.
much.
Take care.
Thanks for
Thank you.
joining.
Thank you all.